What's up everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Mile ADV, a true beginner's guide to adventure motorcycling. Today I'm going to address the age-old question. One of the first videos I did a while ago talked about the debate of why I didn't regret getting a quote-unquote leader bike, or in my case a 1290cc bike. And now that I have a middleweight adventure bike, the looming question is do I regret getting a full-size ADV first instead of going straight to the middleweight or maybe even a smaller bike? So with that, let's get into it. Okay, so let's talk about, do I regret getting a 1290 KTM 1290 Super Adventure S, which in the motorcycle world would be considered a leader bike and a full-size motorcycle. Do I regret getting that bike now that I have a Tiger 900 Rally Pro? The short answer is no. And I think the number one reason for that is when I first started riding motorcycles, I wanted to take my bike everywhere, and I was terrified to ride on the highway. The highway for me was a exhilarating experience and terrifying at the same time. And I will say having a bigger adventure bike made the highway learning, I feel like the learning curve, a lot easier because I had the power to keep up and to get out of the wind of semis when I needed to, and the bike didn't get blown around as much. I noticed with this bike, now that I'm more comfortable on the highway, it's not as big of a deal, but if it's windy or if a big semi passes me, I get blown all over the road, and you feel the wind a lot more. Even though I feel like the Tiger has really great wind protection, being a lighter bike, you still get blown around quite a bit more. So reason number one, I would say no, is just the highway riding was super scary for me, and the leader bike or the big full-size adventure bike made all the difference for me in getting comfortable on the highway. Okay, so let's talk about this one, and this one may come as a little bit of a shock, but off-roading. Do I regret it now being back here on like this, basically what's a dirt bike track because the gate's closed so you can't drive any trucks back here, but you technically could drive a Jeep and a truck back here. I've driven my truck part of the way back here, but that's besides the point. Back here in like these fire roads and dirt tracks, do I regret that I got a full-size adventure bike over a mid-size adventure bike? Again, I'm going to say no, because when you get on a dirt road or you get on a fire road like this, I haven't done any single track yet. We know I'm still very weak in the off-roading category, but when you get on a dirt road and a fire road and you feel, and you have to control that big bike, when you hop onto a mid-size adventure bike, I feel like my skill set went from 0 or maybe like 3 to 45, 50 immediately just by getting the smaller bike, because I'm so used to having to handle and maneuver a bigger bike. And the KTM 1290 Super Adventure S, one nice thing about it is like with the gas tanks low, it is a super well balanced bike. So even off road, it's pretty easy to handle. The one area that is an absolute weak point and totally sucks is like if you get into positions like this where you got to like push the bike to do a 20-point turn to get out of where you're going. Moving that heavier bike is a lot more of a workout. So just make sure you hit the gym, get those guns. But I think if you can move the weight around and you can kind of 20-point turn it, you can get it turned around and you can keep going. But then having gone from a full-size adventure bike to this bike, especially with the 21-inch front wheel, far more off-roading tires, I feel like seriously like my skills just, I shouldn't say my skills, my confidence level went from like a 3 to like a 40. I'm still got 60% of the way to go there before I'm like a pretty confident off-road ADV rider. But I still think that, everything is relative. And so when you go from when I went from a big adventure bike to a mid-sized adventure bike, yeah, because having gone through that experience, this seems so much easier. Okay, and reason number 3 that I don't regret getting a full-size adventure bike over a mid-size first would be the power. Now the triple on this is a 23.5 technically. So VIN wise, I think it's a 24. If you haven't seen my video about the Tiger 900 Rally Pro Oregon Edition, check that out. But this is technically 23.5, so it is just shy of 100 horsepower. The new 24 models, I think, are 110 horsepower, so a little bit more power that they kick out of these. And they have the new LCD screen, and I think that's about it. Everything else, I think, is pretty similar. However, having this bike is definitely not the KTM, and it's not the Ducati. The Ducati was like a Ferrari on 2 wheels. It was absolutely amazing that you could also rip down a dirt road. The KTM, I mean, that thing is absolutely exhilarating to ride. And maybe if I decide to get another bike, and I'm not going to get another bike this year. I can't get any more bikes this year. You sure about that? I'm going to ride this one for a while, but maybe my next one, if I do go, I might go to the KTM Super Adventure R. As I mentioned earlier, I was really close to getting that bike over this bike, but I felt this bike was just a better bang for the buck and kind of a middle road. But I do miss the power of the KTM. That LC8 engine is absolutely amazing, and that power is just so exhilarating and so fun. And even though like I'm a responsible rider, there's just the thrill of like when you have to pass somebody or when you give it the beans, you know, like it takes off and you really feel the power. Not that this bike is a slouch. I mean, it does plenty well. You put it in sport mode and you actually get to use more of the horsepower and torque that's actually available with this engine. I mean, it's no slouch. I mean, it does just fine on the highway, but I do miss the power of that LC8. And I think having that much power, I was terrified to ride the KTM. I mean, which made it a lot more fun. It made me want to ride it because every time I got into it, I was like deathly afraid. And like, even just when I first got it riding like 45 miles an hour through my little town, like it was exhilarating, you know, when you first start riding bikes. But it gave me an absolute respect for the bike. It taught me to really, you know, obey the basic rules, like really looking through intersections, keeping my 4 seconds. But it gave me enough power where I felt if I needed to get out of a situation, I could. So with that being said, number 3, I would say, is the power. I miss the power of the LC8. Absolutely amazing engine. This bike's no slouch. It also sounds good too, but it doesn't compare to the KTM. Okay, reason number 4 is the wind protection. I think if you do any really long rides and when you get your adventure bike, you want to go adventuring. And sometimes adventuring is just going exploring new places. I know there seems to be this stigmata seems to be in the ADV community where it's like if you get an adventure bike, you got to go do like gnarly Chris Birch stuff. I don't buy into that. I think adventuring could just be taking a nice ride to somewhere you've never been on a motorcycle and having fun with it and enjoying your ride and actually wanting to get out and ride your bike. So with that being said, a lot of times when you adventure, you're going to be on the bike for a while and you want good wind protection. Because for me, I think it's not necessarily being on the bike that tires me out after riding for a long time. It's just kind of getting beat down by the wind. Now this one is actually kind of a bit of a tie for both big adventure bikes I've had, the KTM and the Ducati, compared to the Tiger. Now this may sound weird, but whatever magic voodoo Triumph did on the Tiger, this thing actually has a really good wind protection for being such a small bike. However they designed it, I don't get as much like wind buffeting. It feels like how should I say it? Where am I going with this? I think that the windscreen on this is probably the best that I've had as far as like wind noise and buffeting goes on my helmet. And especially with like a peak on your helmet, I don't get any weird pulls with it. And it's super easy to use. You just kind of crank it up and crank it down. Let's do an example. So this screen is really well designed for me. I'm 5'9" on a good day. So if you're my height, I think it's great. They've also got these little side wind deflectors. I feel like the amount of wind that you get beat with when you're on the highway is pretty comparable to a full-size ADV on this bike. So it's a bit of a tie. But the full-size adventure bike, if you're thinking about eventually going more off-road focus and you want to ride like the KTM 890 Adventure R, that thing's hideous. Although it took me a while to actually like the looks of the 1290 as well. So the 1290, I think it's really grown on me and I really love the look of the 1290. But there's really little to no wind protection on that thing. I feel if you go with the Norden 901, far better wind fairings. I think that's what a lot of people really like it is for those longer rides. It feels like it's got better wind protection, but the windscreen is like fixed. I think on the new Explorer version of the Norden 901, it does have a taller windscreen, so that might be a little bit better. But whatever Triumph has done in the wind tunnel testing or whatever, wind tunnel testing, they have made this thing absolutely amazing. So actually it's a bit of a tie. But if I was going to go to some of the other models, the big adventure bike would win out for sure. And getting comfortable on the bike is probably really important when you first start because you don't want to feel beat down and discouraged when you go out and ride. You want to like, can't wait to go ride again. And I feel like the KTM and the Ducati did both of those things. The Ducati, especially on the highway, the Ducati was absolutely amazing. So with that one, number 4 is a little bit of a tie because I feel like this Triumph is really special in that category when it comes to wind protection. Okay, this one is also a little bit of a tie in some regards, and that's the 19-inch front wheel that comes on a lot of the larger adventure motorcycles. So for me, it was the 1290 Super Adventure S. I know the R comes 21. If you get the 1200 GT 19, the Rally Pro on the 1200 Tiger, also a 21. But for the BMW is a 19, the Ducati was a 19, and I feel that 19-inch front wheel, yes, it's definitely not as good off-road. I mean, you can definitely feel it, and it makes sense, right? Like, I like to mountain bike, and there's a reason that 29ers dominate the space. You just monster truck over everything. And it's, you see the 27.5-inch wheel size like fading out. So the bigger wheel definitely gives you an advantage off-road. But with all that being said, I think when you buy a motorcycle, one of the things you want to do is you want to go out and you want to ride like mountain highways in the twisties and have fun. And that 19-inch front wheel just turns so much better. There's a joke, and also because I have a Harley, there's a whole thing where it's like, if you put a 21-inch front wheel on a bagger, it's not truly a performance bagger. I think there's a really cool channel called Crucy's Original. He built some really cool Harleys, if you're into Harleys, out of Phoenix, and I think that's his quote. So I'm gonna give him credit. If you haven't checked his channel out, definitely check it out. But he's like, because it just doesn't handle as well. It is more sluggish. Now, granted, this bike is still plenty fun on the way up here to these roads, on the highway up here. It still turns well. But if you really want to gain confidence and just have the bike be more maneuverable in the corners, especially the Ducati on the highway in the paved corners was absolutely amazing. It really felt like an upright sports bike. It was amazing. And actually, having demoed and ridden like a Yamaha R1 and not having ridden a sports bike since I had my motorcycle permit a long time ago, and then got out of motorcycling in general because my friends had motorcycles, so I was like riding theirs. I'm getting lost in the weeds here. But I mean, having ridden a sport bike before and then riding the Ducati in the corners, it felt like a big, comfortable, upright sports bike to me anyways, and it handled so well. And so this one may seem a little bit counterintuitive because, again, if you're like that, your goal is Chris Birch, off-roading adventure bikes, then you need the 21-inch front wheel. It's going to be far more advantageous. But if you're new, and I feel like most of us are, and if you're not new, I'm not sure why you're watching this channel, but thank you for joining anyways. And with that being said, hit subscribe, like, notifications, all that good stuff for the YouTube algorithm. Comment below, even if it's a hateful comment. I love all of them, so please leave a comment below. Yeah, then you definitely want to go to 21. But for the rest of us that want to go out on our adventures, maybe our long rides and having fun with friends, and maybe even stopping at Starbucks because we bought a GS, then the 19-inch front wheel is just so much better. And it brings the bike lower to the ground. It makes it easier to handle. If you have seen one of my original videos where I talk about why I got the 1290 Super Adventure S over the R, is because the bike was lower to the ground. And when you're first getting started, being able to put both feet on the ground makes everything way better. With that being said, I've now lifted my Harley actually 2 inches to make it handle better. So on my Road King, I actually put a lift on it, which is a bit ironic, right? Anyways, again, a bit of a tie because now I do want to get better off-road, and there's a lot of advantages of having the 21-inch front wheel. And I think if I went with another full-size adventure bike, I might consider like the 1200 of the Rally Pro with the 21-inch front wheel. But right now I'm going with the 900 for a while. So yeah. So with that being said, if you've made it this far through all my rumblings and ranting and all that being said, hit subscribe, leave a comment below, and until next time, stay safe out there.